In late 1977, Doctor Who's 15th season would again show how the show would evolve with each change in the production team. Like how you updated Skype yesterday and it was all new and shiny, and now there's another goddamn update today.
Contact has been made.
However, a move away from gothic horror in favour of imaginative adventures set in space would stretch the BBC's resources like a piece of underpant elastic holding up a grand piano hovering above an orphanage. That's a bit crap. Poor timing happens to everyone, but one of the best examples of that you will ever see on this channel is when Doctor Who wanted to go for more space stories, just in time for it to be compared to another sci-fi classic. Yeah, okay, there was that, but then there was also this.
Goodness me, we are so f***ing screwed.
Incoming producer Graham Williams had been tasked by the BBC to tone down the violence and gore that was prevalent in the previous season of Doctor Who. The new season would then feature a lot more excursions into outer space in the far future.
I like your new dress.
It's the old one.
Yes.
Horror of Fang Rock would see the Doctor and Leela involved in a horror-tinged adventure set on a lighthouse. Someone's killing the lighthouse keepers and the survivors of a crashed yacht, but it's not the famed beast of Fang Rock, but a Rutan scout. How would you describe a Rutan? A green blob seems to work best, but it's a shapeshifter, so most of the time it's in the shape of one of the dead lighthouse keepers, Reuben.
The chameleon factor, sometimes called lycanthropy.
It's a very simple story told very well and gave us our only chance to see the Rutans, a race of green blob shape-shifting creatures who'd been established as the Sontarans' traditional enemies, because, Sontarans apparently have a morbid fear of light bulbs smothered in green detergent.
Leela, I've made a terrible mistake. I thought I'd lock the enemy out. Instead, I've locked it in with us.
Fang Rock by Terrance Dicks was a last-minute replacement for another serial about vampires, also by Terrance Dicks. That year, the BBC was launching a prestigious adaptation of Dracula, and were worried Doctor Who might steal their thunder. Which is ironic, because decades later, people are still enjoying this season of Doctor Who, but the BBC's 1977 Count Dracula starring Louis Jourdan is often only mentioned due to its effect on Doctor Who.
Turn natural.
Dicks didn't want to do a story about a lighthouse, but Robert Holmes had obviously harboured a grudge for being forced to set the Time Warrior in the Middle Ages, and had always stated that revenge was a dish best served cold, which is just like anything from Uber Eats.
He said, Reuben will not answer, so you must stay here and keep the boy pressure up.
Boiler pressure, miss?
That is what I said.
It's the only original series story to have its studio work carried out away from London, in this case Birmingham, and the crew, unused to working on complex dramas, were by all accounts really invested in making it a good show. It's not a perfect show, but there's a chilling atmosphere where every one of the guest characters dies in some horrible way, just like appearing on Graham Norton while sober. Louise Jameson had complained loudly about having to wear brown contact lenses, and at the end of this story, Leela is temporarily blinded by an explosion that somehow makes her eyes change colour. It's obviously bullshit, but it works because the cast make it work.
Pigmentation dispersal caused by the flash. Her eyes have changed colour.
Tom Baker could read out loud the ingredients of a packet of Skittles and make you shit your pants. To make a convincing Rutan at home, boys and girls, all you have to do is take a common household light bulb and cake it in a mixture of washing detergent and whatever rotting leafy vegetables you happen to have in your refrigerator. How to describe the invisible enemy? Well, A Tale of Two Cities begins with, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. The Invisible Enemy by Bob Baker and Dave Martin manages to contain some of the very best effects of 1970s Doctor Who, and some of the very worst, often one after the other. It's like having lunch with a friend who has severe mood swings, never quite knowing how they will react to splitting the bill.
I only had the salad, you cunt.
The story sees the Doctor taken over by a spaceborne virus and hospitalised, where the Doctor and Leela are cloned and injected into the Doctor's body to try and find the prawn Vindaloo. Again, there are some well-executed effect sequences, interspersed with not so well done stuff. Just why Leela is attacked by hairy testicles, I don't know. The big enemy reveal, the nucleus of the virus of the swarm, part prawn, part virus, all shit, takes everything good that you'd experienced from this story and taken away any goodwill you had towards these episodes and just done a double flush. Waited 5 minutes for the cistern to clear and refill and give it another double flush, just to be really sure. One effect for this story was a little unusual and was originally planned just for one story, but the idea had such potential that it became a mainstay of the series for years to come. Of course, this is where K9 comes in. K9, basically a robot dog that's also a smartphone with a laser gun, like Siri packing heat.
My photon beam weaponry has 4 levels of intensity, Doctor. Kill,
No,
paralyze...
not kill. Not kill. Just knock out, huh?
Affirmative.
Good dog.
K9 became the Doctor's second best friend,
He's my second best friend.
as well as his mobile gat. And the best thing was, years later when you're stuck in traffic and you think to yourself, hang on a minute, K9, I get it now.
Contact has been made.
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 Since this was made before Star Wars had opened in Britain, this was the last spacey serial before Star Wars made all kids' TV sci-fi look like preschoolers' nativity plays, and not very good ones.
What we need here is some sort of barrier.
K9 worked as a character for this story so well that he was quickly added as a companion.
Can you explain simply?
Negative.
Voiced by John Leeson, K9 became one of the series' most popular companions, even though technically it was a prop. K9, designed by VFX designer Tony Harding, proved to be a double-edged sword for the show. It helped give the show a modern vibe in the post-Star Wars era of robots and lasers.
Would you like a ball bearing?
Please do not knock, Master.
But it also gave the Doctor an easy way out of danger, which is the reason why both K9 and the Sonic Screwdriver were written out in the early 80s. K9 was a rather primitive design under the hood, using early radio-controlled technology that clashed with some of the studio cameras, was slow on a perfectly smooth studio surface, and almost unusable on location. Tom Baker hated K9 as a character, but liked John Leeson as a person.
What is it?
Well, he's a sort of friend.
Affirmative. Friend.
This is the point where the famed hyperinflation of the late 70s really started to bite into the show's budget and manifest itself in the production values of the show. The old wooden TARDIS set from the previous year, having been damaged in storage, was scrapped, and there was a return to the traditional white console room, even though it looks very grey.
Number 2 control room being closed for redecoration. I don't like the colour.
White isn't a colour.
That's the trouble with computers. Always thinking black and white.
Image of the Fendahl by Chris Boucher was another attempt at gothic horror. This time some archaeologists working from a country mansion are using a device called a time scanner to investigate a human skull that's older than it should be, like Harrison Ford in later Indiana Jones films.
Would you like a jelly baby? No, I don't suppose you would.
One of the scientists is also the leader of a coven of yokels. You know they're yokels because they talk about the old ways and sound like they're from Bristol. Ooh-ar.
We know the old ways. 13 be the number.
The Doctor and Leela hook up with Granny Tyler and her grandson. Okay, it's not what you think. And they take on the infinitely old Fendahl.
Use the best china, 4 cups laid out on a tray. Off you go. Oh, and some fruitcake.
Anything else?
No. I love fruitcake.
Image of the Fendahl has some of the series' very best acting towards clearly not very scary monsters, but also possibly the most ridiculous creation. Scientist Thea Ransom has been transformed into some gold lady who flitters about the house. I have seen this dozens of times and I still can't work out why. Fendahl does have a really good cast and nearly works as intended, but oh god, why? Sunmakers is a story where the title only has a very slight bearing on the story. The TARDIS lands on Pluto, which, under the light of 6 artificial suns, is a hyper-industrialized and capitalistic society of workers treated as drones, and the company that runs the planet taxing everyone to death. Written by former script editor Robert Holmes, who's now freelancing, this was a savage parody of both the British tax system, British business practices, capitalism, and revolution. Politically, it sits on the fence so much that your balls will get a rash.
These taxes, they are like sacrifices to tribal gods?
Well, roughly speaking, but paying tax is more painful.
But it's a brilliant script with some marvellous performances from the work units, the unctuous gatherer all the way to the odious collector.
You know what I think?
That's a cat's question. With a brain your size, you don't think, right?
Also, some of the dullest, cheapest looking sets this side of, you guessed it, the Tomorrow People.
They've got things called guns, and what have we got?
You have nothing, Mandrill. No pride, no courage, no manhood.
If you want to make your own sun, boys and girls, get some hydrogen and a match, but ask your mum and dad for permission first. Also, make a note of the telephone number of the local fire brigade.
Why should I be frightened?
There is a chemical inhibitor in the air, mistress.
You mean there's nothing to be afraid of, just something in the air?
Affirmative.
Right.
While the editing is a little flabby during some of the filmed action scenes, the dialogue is sparkling and the performances are excellent.
The company was looking for property in this sector. Earth was running down, its people dying. We made a deal.
Go.
Sunmakers is structured in a way to keep Leela and the Doctor apart for most of the story, since at the time, Tom Baker did not react well to the character of Leela and Louise Jameson, and so they were kept apart for large parts of the action. While their relationship is apparently much better years later, the tension between the two off-screen doesn't really become apparent on-screen all that often, which is probably why Louise Jameson is one of the few original series companions to have gone on to better things after her stint on Doctor Who.
Yes, K9. What do you want, a biscuit?
Doctor Who did not often do overtly funny stories well, but Sunmakers, with its rich dialogue and performances, was one of the few times this approach worked, and worked well.
It's the gatherer! Quick, run!
Run, Doctor, it's the gatherer!
And now we reach the penultimate story of the season. It's the infamous four-parter Underworld. Underworld's script is decent enough, from usually imaginative writers Bob Baker and Dave Martin.
The quest is the quest.
Quest is the quest.
It's a story about the Minions, a race who basically destroyed themselves after early Time Lords tried to help their evolution.
As used in the time ships of the gods.
A Minion ship has spent quite some time on a quest. Now, you might think trying to find a parking space at the mall the week before Christmas takes forever. These guys have spent 100,000 years looking for another Minion ship, the P7E.
The quest is the quest.
It's a thinly veiled reimagining of the story of Jason and the Argonauts, except with spaceships and Chromakey. There's a pretty decent spaceship set for the Minion vessel that does double duty as the P7E.
The quest is the quest.
By now the budget was so compromised there was apparently no money left for a few measly cave sets. Now, I'm no expert, but when you call a story Underworld, the chances are you have to show something called Underworld.
The quest. The quest.
So the solution here was to do the whole thing with Chromakey. Huge chunks of the episodes are actors blue screened onto model sets as they run through caves. It sometimes works, and sometimes doesn't work. It's like trying to claim on an extended warranty. It's not quite a mess narratively, nearly, but not quite, but it's certainly a mess in terms of the production. Not nearly, most definitely. Thankfully, it was only an experiment and it wasn't tried again in a hurry. Like the time you tried an asparagus daiquiri. The only way you'll ever order another asparagus daiquiri is if you've just polished off your sixth.
The quest
is the quest, yes, Captain.
The 6-part story Invasion of Time ends the season with a, well, it's not quite a bang and not quite a whimper, so it's either a bimper or a wang. The Doctor has possibly gone certifiably loco, signing a deal with some aliens and then turns up on Gallifrey to claim he's now Lord President.
I claim the presidency of the Council of Time Lords.
I believe we have chosen well.
He rejects Leela and lets some shapeless aliens called Vardens take over. Oh, but it was all a ruse and he sends them packing. Except the Vardens were pawns of the Sontarans who'll take more than Technobabble to get rid of. Invasion of Time has a lot going for it, and a lot going against it, like fossil fuels. We see a lot more of the TARDIS interior, including its swimming pool and lots of corridors, some with crumbling brickwork. Okay, it's more of a budget crunch issue than a deliberate stylistic choice, and a very controversial one with fans, but you know, it just about works.
Now, don't get any ideas.
Invasion of Time was a last-minute replacement written under a pseudonym, David Agnew, which was commonly used by the BBC drama department at the time, but was in fact in this case producer Graham Williams and new script editor Anthony Reid. Showrunners and script editors writing for their own shows was frowned upon at the BBC back then, due to agreements with the Writers Guild.
I do find astrophysics a bore, I must say, but then one must fight them on their own terms, don't you think?
Oh, one must, yeah.
I mean, for 6 episodes written in a few days, the script mostly works.
But you have access to the greatest source of knowledge in the universe.
Well, I do talk to myself sometimes, yes.
I mean the Matrix.
Oh, that old thing.
On balance, I quite enjoyed the Invasion of Time, but it's got some unresolved plot issues. Like, why the hell did the Doctor help the Vardens in the first place? Was it a ruse to shake up Gallifreyan society? Was it to avoid a parking ticket? Was it a prank that went wrong and was later excused as a social experiment because it actually wasn't funny?
As Bruce always said, there's nothing more useless than a lock with a voice print.
It also very quickly writes out Leela by having her fall in love off-screen with Capitol Guard Commander Andred, and K9 also decides to stay.
Will he be lonely, K9?
Insufficient data, mistress.
Even though Louise Jameson had made her mind up to leave at the end of the season, the last-minute nature of the script meant there was no actual dialogue to build up the romance between her and Andred. So the actors would use non-verbal action to hint at their blossoming relationship through looks, gestures, and of course, here Andred is sending nude pics, despite the fact Leela doesn't have a phone.
What colour would you prefer, sir?
Orange.
There doesn't appear to be an orange one.
And of course, the Vardens. You can make some Vardens yourself at home, boys and girls. Just take some aluminium foil. Actually, that's it, just take some aluminium foil. And when they're finally revealed as corporeal beings, they're just some twats in uniforms. Casting usually helps, and the Gallifreyans at least are mostly well cast. From the obsequious and devious Castellan to the first female Time Lord we've ever seen, Rodan.
Have you got a screwdriver?
One piece of casting that worked about as well as soy milk made from full cream dairy milk was the eventual villain Storr. Storr was played by a guy who usually played idiots in sitcoms, and here he takes previously fearsome Sontarans and turns them into something as menacing as a plush panda.
I have other duties.
I don't want to use the word awful, but I'd be lying if I said that wasn't a 100% accurate way to describe this atrocious performance. Even the extras with a line or two are more menacing.
Where are you from, soldier?
Gallifrey.
Gallifrey. Never heard of it.
And this woman here, one of the Gallifreyan outsiders, is credited as Gay Smith, later became a very famous racehorse trainer in Australia, where she's better known as Gay Waterhouse.
That was a prodigious throw.
Prodigious?
Well, it was an amazing throw.
Oh, it was nothing.
Well, yes, I know, just an old hunting
Sorry?
series. Come on.
It was around this time that a series of Doctor Who action figures was released, with this being the figure based on Tom Baker. The story goes that for various reasons the original sculpt was destroyed, and this one was used instead, which is apparently based on a prototype Gambit from the New Avengers.
One grows tired of jelly babies, Castellan.
Oh, indeed one does.
One grows tired of almost everything, Castellan.
Indeed, sir.
Except power.
When we say hyperinflation, we're not talking 1 or 2% a year, we're talking 20% a year. The series budget would cover all types of expenses such as costumes, sets, special effects. Sure, you could save money on fabric by creating a character like Leela, but the overages on keeping up a constant supply of fresh jelly babies in Tom Baker's pocket would make your eyes water. So let's use jelly babies to explain how the budget suffered. Here was the budget at the start of a year of Doctor Who. Some jelly babies for the cast, some jelly babies for the crew, some jelly babies for the sets and costumes, a jelly baby for the special effects, and so on. Due to super high rates of inflation, the number of jelly babies needed to pay for something increased, while the overall supply of jelly babies stayed the same. So in effect, your spending power would look more like this, but I like the red ones. Season 15 was a difficult season to make behind the scenes, with Tom Baker dominating the show, both in front of and behind the cameras.
I knew I'd like you. Come in.
The BBC had instructed the producer Graham Williams to tone down the horror and the violence and increase the humour, which made reining in Tom Baker's excesses more and more difficult. And the move towards more space adventures had exacerbated the show's budgetary pressures.
Would you care for a jelly baby?
The next season would be somewhat less fraught and brought with it an interesting experiment. An entire 26-episode series with an overarching storyline spread across its 6 stories. The search for the key to time. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, leave a comment below or check out some of our other videos.